What if you lost your job tomorrow? Literally tomorrow. Or what if one unexpected medical bill completely destroyed years of your hard-earned savings? It happens all the time. One bad day can wreck everything if you aren't ready. That's exactly why an emergency fund is your ultimate financial shock absorber. It's the one thing that prevents a temporary setback from becoming permanent debt. Want to know exactly how much you should save and where to keep it? Stick around for the full explainer. And hey, if you're finding this content valuable, don't forget to like this explainer and subscribe for more simple, practical personal finance tips. Your support helps us create more content like this. All right, let's get into it. So here's the game plan for today. We're looking at the ultimate financial shock absorber, defining what a true emergency actually is, calculating your exact cash target, walking through a tiered storage strategy, and wrapping up with how to avoid the cash drag trap.
Going back to that pretty terrifying scenario, losing your job out of nowhere. Think about it. Your paycheck just stops. Boom. But your rent, your groceries, insurance? Yeah, those arrows keep pointing right out of your bank account. And that's the whole point here. An emergency fund is literally the only thing standing between a temporary bump in the road and a vicious high-interest debt spiral. It keeps you breathing.
Get this, 37%. According to the Fed, nearly 37% of Americans would actually struggle to cover a totally unexpected $400 expense. That's just one blown tire, one minor trip to urgent care, and more than a third of people are reaching for a credit card. We are going to make absolutely sure you are not in that 37%.
Okay, part one, the ultimate financial shock absorber.
We really need to rethink what this cash pile actually is. It's not some idle investment getting lazy on the sidelines. It's a fundamental safety net. You've got to protect yourself against what financial planners call the double whammy. This is the absolute nightmare scenario. Imagine losing your income at the exact same time the stock market tanks. Just think back to 2008. If your safety net was tied up in stocks and you lost your job, you had to fire sell your investments at rock bottom just to buy groceries. You locked in massive, devastating losses. Having liquid, safe cash prevents that. It is your ultimate shock absorber. There's this fantastic quote from the white coat investor that hits the nail on the head. Since an emergency fund is insurance, the return of your principal matters a lot more than the return on your principal. That is absolutely crucial. It's totally fine if this specific bucket of money isn't making you rich overnight. You're actually supposed to lose a little purchasing power to inflation here. Why? Because holding insurance costs money. This cash buys you peace of mind. It gives you the psychological freedom to take bigger risks with your career or your actual investment portfolio.
Moving on to part two, defining a true financial emergency.
We have got to be completely ruthless about what actually justifies breaking the glass on this cash. Let's look at true emergencies. These are sudden job loss, unexpected medical bills, or your car's transmission blowing up. These are survival threats. Now look at the false emergencies. Your best friend's destination wedding, last-minute holiday shopping, or a killer deal on a new 4K TV. The rule here is incredibly simple. Do not touch this money for discretionary stuff, ever. If it doesn't immediately threaten your financial stability, it is not an emergency, period. Vanguard has this really great way of looking at it, breaking expenses down into today and someday. The today bucket is your everyday spending, those short-term goals and those minor little hiccups you know will pop up this year. The someday bucket, that's the big, scary, uncertain stuff, like getting laid off. Your emergency fund acts as a bridge between the two. It keeps today running smoothly so a someday shock doesn't totally derail your life.
All right, part three, calculating your exact cash target. So let's do the actual math. How much cash do you really need sitting around? The classic golden rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses. And why that specific number? Well, historically, that's roughly the average time it takes to find a new job at a similar level or for insurance benefits to finally kick in. But hey, notice I said essential expenses. You do not need to save 6 months' worth of your current luxury lifestyle. Just figure out the absolute bare minimum you need to keep the lights on, pay the mortgage, and buy groceries. And honestly, your magic number heavily depends on your personal risk profile. Look at this breakdown. If your household is stable, meaning maybe you've got dual incomes and steady W-2 salaries, 3 months is probably plenty. But if you're in the variable camp, like a single-income household or a freelancer with wild cash flow, you really need to aim for 6 months or more. And for those in the fixed category, like retirees living off their portfolios, planners actually suggest holding 12 to 24 months in cash, so you never have to sell off assets during a market downturn.
Section 4, the tiered cash storage strategy. Okay, this is honestly my favorite part of the explainer. How do you store all this cash so it's safe, but maybe still does a little bit of work for you?
The absolute biggest factor here is the liquidity timeline. Your core emergency cash has to be fully accessible within 24 to 48 hours. No penalties, no waiting. If water is pouring through your ceiling or your car dies on the highway, you cannot wait a week for a trade to settle. You need cash right then and there.
So here's how a smart tiered strategy works. Tier 1 is immediate. Keep about 1 to 2 months of living expenses right in your regular checking account. Boom, instant access. Tier 2 is accessible. This is where the bulk goes, 3 to 6 months of expenses into a high-yield savings account. It might take a day or two to transfer, but it's earning a solid competitive interest rate. And then there's Tier 3, extended. If you're building a massive 12-month fund, you can lock the back half of it into short-term CDs or treasury bills just to squeeze out a bit more yield safely.
Now, flip that around, and there are some absolutely terrible places to keep this money. Please do not put your emergency fund in the stock market or crypto. They are way too volatile, and a crash could wipe you out right when you need the cash most. Also, don't rely on credit cards as your backup plan. That just traps you in 20% interest debt. And tapping your 401k early? Forget about it. The taxes in that brutal 10% penalty will permanently stunt your retirement growth.
Finally, Part 5, Avoiding the Cash Drag Trap.
Let's level up for a second and talk about the hidden danger of hoarding too much cash. It's a massive opportunity cost. Look at this. If you stash an excessive 50 grand in a savings account at 4%, over 20 years, it grows to maybe $109,000. Not bad, right? But if you only kept what you actually needed for emergencies and invested the rest at an average 10% return, it would skyrocket to roughly $336,000. That massive gap? That's the cash drag trap. Cash is super safe, but it is a horrible tool for long-term wealth building. Which brings us to the advanced move. As your net worth explodes, your need for a giant pile of cash actually shrinks. In the financial independence community, folks with huge diversified taxable portfolios or access to things like a home equity line of credit can essentially self-insure. When you have tons of accessible assets to tap into, your overall wealth becomes the safety net, and you can afford to keep less idle cash.
So, let's tie the whole shebang together. Here is a totally actionable 4-step game plan to build your shock absorber today. Step 1. Dig in and assess your true monthly core expenses. Step 2. Pick your target, 3 to 6 months, based on your own risk profile. Step 3. Put it on autopilot. Set up an automatic transfer to your high-yield savings account every single payday so you don't even have to think about it. And Step 4. Check in once a year and adjust the target, especially if you get a raise or have a kid.
To wrap things up, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. Are you just relying on blind luck, or are you ready to build a real financial shock absorber? Because financial emergencies aren't a maybe. They are a mathematical certainty. The only variable is when they strike. So take control of your financial destiny today. Figure out your target and start building that safety net. Thanks so much for hanging out and exploring this with me. Now get out there and build that shock absorber.